My family always uses my card to travel without me, so this time I changed their tickets to a deserted island. My name is Marjorie Hale, and for years, my family has treated me as if my only worth was the plastic card in my wallet. Vacation's that word used to make my heart flutter with excitement. As a young woman, I dreamed of beaches, mountains, places I only read about in the stacks of travel magazines at the library where I used to spend my afternoons. I thought that when I finally retired, when I finally had time for myself, I'd see those places. But the reality was different. My family traveled all the time, and I was never included. Not really. They would plan, book, and pack, and I would be the one to make things easier, as they called it. Which meant pay for it. It started small. A ticket here, a hotel there. My son, my daughter, even my husband, they would all look at me with that practiced tone. Mom, it's just easier if you cover it. We'll sort it out later. But later never came. They enjoyed five-star resorts and shopping sprees, while I stayed home, my card balance swelling like a balloon I knew would eventually burst. At first I told myself it was love, that this was what a mother does, that being generous was part of who I was. But then, something began to rot in me. It wasn't just the money. It was the way they left me behind. Not once did anyone say, "Come with us." Not once did anyone pause and think, maybe Mom wants to sit on the beach too. I wasn't invited. I was a sponsor. A background figure who made the fun possible but was never part of it. The first few trips I pretended not to care. I smiled when they sent me photos, forced myself to type cheerful emojis into the family chat. They laughed on camera in front of Eiffel Tower backdrops, stood arm in arm on white sand beaches. And me? I watched from my kitchen, reheating leftovers, telling myself, it's fine. I don't need those things anymore. But something shifted. As the trips multiplied, so did the emptiness inside me. A gnawing ache I didn't dare admit out loud. They don't see me. They don't love me the way I thought they did. I'll never forget one particular afternoon. My daughter called me, her voice sugary sweet. She said, "Mom, we're going to Bali. Flights are insane right now, but if you just book it on your card, we'll figure it out." And I heard laughter in the background, like she was already celebrating. I stared at the framed photo of her as a child on my mantel, gap-toothed, eyes sparkling. That little girl who used to run to me when she scraped her knee. And now? She didn't need me. Not unless it was to hand over my card. My husband wasn't any better. In fact, he was worse. He had a way of making it sound as though this was my role, my duty. "Marjorie," he'd say, adjusting his tie as though he were about to deliver a verdict. "You know they rely on you. Don't make things difficult." As if I was the selfish one for hesitating. Over time, their voices blended into one chorus. Pay. Stay home. Smile. And I did. Until recently, something inside me broke the last time. I overheard them, my son and daughter, in the living room. They were looking at resorts online, laughing about the spas, the cocktails, and then my son said, loud and careless, "Don't worry about the bill. Mom will cover it. She always does." They didn't know I was standing in the hallway, their words slicing into me like glass. My daughter added, with a smirk in her voice, "Yeah, she loves it. Makes her feel useful." Useful. That was the word. Not loved. Not cherished. Useful. I went upstairs, shut my bedroom door, and sat on the edge of my bed. My hands shook, not with sadness, but with something sharper, darker. For the first time, I felt the heat of anger. They thought I loved being invisible. They thought my generosity was weakness. They thought I would never fight back. That night, lying in the dark, I whispered to myself, enough. Enough of being used. Enough of being left behind. Enough of smiling while they spent my life away. I didn't know how yet, but I knew one thing with certainty. The next trip would not go the way they imagined. I didn't sleep that night. The house had its familiar late-hour sounds: the refrigerator's quiet throat clearing, the tick of the hallway clock, an occasional car whispering down the street. But inside me, there was a new sound, a low hum of decision. It surprised me. For years, I'd known how to do many things: fill the pantry, make a budget stretch until it squeaked, keep a school full of children safe and learning. But the one thing I had never allowed myself to learn was how to stop being useful. I wore usefulness like a uniform, the old principal in me, straightening the lapels every morning, checking the mirror before facing the world. It was polite. It was dependable. It was slowly killing me. If you had seen me during those years, you'd have thought I was content. I was good at looking content. On the morning they left for Rome, the trip I told the neighbors I chose to skip, because ancient ruins aren't kind to my knees. I walked them to the car with packed lunches I'd made, just in case the airport food was dreadful. My daughter kissed my cheek, the smell of expensive perfume blooming against my skin. My son took the keys I had set out for the rideshare driver, to make it easier. My husband, Richard, patted my shoulder with 2 fingers, the way you encourage a dependable appliance. He looked at the clock and said, "Traffic on I-95's ugly at this hour," as though the only variable in his morning was the highway. When the trunk closed, and they drove off with my card in his wallet, I stood in the driveway, holding a paper bag of empty sandwich wrappers. The morning birds were loud in the maple tree. I remember thinking, there were so many small, stupid humiliations. The time the bank froze my card for unusual activity because a boutique in Paris and a resort in Santorini rang up charges on the same day. The representative asked to confirm my location. "Ma'am, are you in Europe?" While I stood in my kitchen in New Jersey, with wet hands and a sink full of spinach, I felt this quick, foolish shame just for being home. Or the day Mrs. Alvarez from the next block waved from her hydrangeas and called out, "I loved your photos from Phuket." I didn't correct her. I said thank you. I went inside and deleted the pictures from the family thread, so I wouldn't have to pretend to like them anymore. It wasn't only the money, though. Money has a way of turning love into ledger lines. It was language. Words shaped everything. "Help us out. You're the best. You know we'll pay you back." Phrases like styrofoam peanuts, light and empty, filling space until you start to believe the box is full of something. When I retired, I thought the language would change. I imagined words like rest, adventure, together. Instead, the chorus just got sweeter and more efficient. "Mom, you're a legend," my son, Evan, would text when a last-minute upgrade appeared like magic. "You saved the day." I was a day saver who watered plants, kept an immaculate calendar of their flights, and learned to translate jet lag into time zones, so I knew the right hour to send, "How was the flight?" without waking anyone. At the counseling center where I consult 2 afternoons a week, I tell young people about boundaries. We talk about the word no, how it can feel at first like a door slamming, but is really the first hinge in a new home. I say things such as, when you give without asking for anything, you teach people to keep taking. They nod, eyes bright, writing it down. And every time, there's a part of me that wants to tear the page from their notebook and stick it to my own refrigerator. I, who can spot codependence at 20 paces, had built a palace of it and called it love. The truth: I had been compensating. When the children were small and money was thin, I outgave my fear so none of them would feel the pinch of our life. When Richard began measuring affection in efficiency and approval in balance sheets, I outgave my loneliness so the house would not echo with it. I gave so much that even I forgot there were other ways to be a mother, a wife, a woman. You can be generous and still be present. You can be kind and still be seen. No one told me I had to choose. But somehow, I did. There was the birthday, my 55th, when they sent a video from an infinity pool in Cabo. The sun was perfect. The sky, the exact blue you're afraid to describe, because it will sound like a lie. They shouted in unison, "Happy birthday, Mom," and someone splashed the camera. In the background, a waiter lifted a tray of drinks. I paused the video and studied their faces. Each of them looked beautiful and far away, and not one of them glanced down at the message I'd sent that morning asking if we could do dinner the following week. I made myself a small cake that night, a lemon loaf with powdered sugar, and sang quietly while the dishwasher ran. I hadn't needed to, but I put a candle in it. It felt important to watch a flame I'd lit for myself. Resolve isn't a trumpet. It's a tuning fork. You strike it once, and then you spend a while listening for the note to settle inside you. Mine sounded like this. I will not be an instrument they play when they want music. I will be the one holding the baton. I didn't know yet what song would come next. I only knew the old one was done. And then the small experiments began. I started saying no to inconsequential things to see whether the world would crack. No, I can't babysit on Thursday afternoon. No, I won't cover the deposit until we talk about a budget. The sky remained intact. There were flurries of annoyance, of course, and the familiar choreography of guilt. You always make everything so complicated, Mom, Sienna said, rearranging her smile into something that looked like concern. Are you feeling okay? But nothing collapsed. If anything, I learned how much scaffolding I'd been holding in place for everyone. When I stepped back, the structure creaked. I revisited old statements. I made tea and gave myself the painful courtesy of reading line by line. Taxis, tips, tours, upgrades, lounges, bottle service, late checkout fees, a massage I could practically feel in the receipt's elegant font. I circled totals in red ink like a schoolteacher grading papers. The number at the bottom made my chest feel hollow, as though I'd walked up too many stairs too fast. Then I found the year I'd needed a new roof and delayed it 2 months because Sienna had a can't-miss yoga retreat. I remembered the bucket under the dining room leak, the shame blooming on my ceiling like a lily. I remembered pretending I liked bucket sounds. That night, I dreamt I stood at an airport gate, the departures board flickering with impossible destinations. Respect, mercy, enough. I stood with no luggage, only my hands. The agent scanned my face and said, "You've been upgraded." When I woke, I wrote the word on a yellow sticky note and pressed it onto my bathroom mirror. Upgrade. Not for them. For me. People think anger makes you loud. Sometimes, it makes you precise. I became very precise. I stopped answering texts the second they arrived. I waited an hour, then 2, just to feel the oddness of not rushing. I practiced holding silence when someone filled it with their convenience. When Richard said, "Put it on your card, I'll sort it next week," I asked, "Which day next week?" He blinked as though I'd turned on the wrong light. "Thursday," he said. "What time Thursday?" He laughed. Then he stopped laughing, because I wasn't laughing. 10 a.m., he said. And when 10 a.m. came and went, I forwarded him the receipt with a single sentence. Still awaiting reimbursement. The money appeared by evening, irritated, as if it had been inconvenienced by the trip. A strange tenderness came with all this. Not for them, at least not yet, but for that version of me who had believed invisibility was the price of love. I began taking small trips that required no airport. A morning walk to the lake, a ticket to a Tuesday matinee, a museum alone, where I could stand as long as I liked in front of a painting, without anyone saying they were hungry. I brought a notebook. I wrote the things I had not said. I wrote the things I wished someone had said to me. I wrote, "You are not a wallet. You are a woman who has kept the lights on and the world turning with your bare hands." It felt like a prayer. When you start to see the machinery, it's hard to unsee it. My family wasn't evil. They were simply conditioned by me, by habit, by the ease of a system that delivered pleasure with no friction. But habit is not destiny. And I had finally remembered that the person who built the system had the right to turn it off. The next request came. There is always a next request. "Mom, we're thinking of a quick getaway." Sienna said, breezy, like she was asking me to pass the salt. Something relaxing. We've been so stressed. I listened to her describe an adult's only resort with tranquil private beaches and stunning off-grid experiences, the kind of marketing phrases that make discomfort sound like a spiritual choice. I said, "Let me think about it." I said it slowly. The way you taste a fruit you've never tried before, discovering it's sweeter than it looks. After we hung up, I stood at the kitchen window. The maple threw dappled light across the sink. The hum inside me had settled into something steadier. I wasn't interested in being cruel. I wasn't auditioning for martyrdom. I was interested in balance, the powerful kind that makes acrobats look like they are floating. I rinsed my cup, dried it, and placed it upside down on the rack, a small, satisfying punctuation at the end of a sentence I had been writing for years. And then a thought arrived, clear and improbable, trailing a little mischief behind it. If they wanted off-grid so badly, what would happen if they truly tasted it? Not curated, not cushioned, not padded, with the soft promises of a luxury brochure. Off-grid. A word like a mirror. I didn't rush the thought away. I let it stretch out on the couch of my mind and make itself comfortable. Revenge was never my language. But reflection was. Perhaps there was a way to make those two words rhyme. By the time evening came, the idea hadn't dimmed. It glowed. Not with malice, but with a kind of justice I could finally recognize as love for myself. The next time they planned a trip on my dime, I would say yes. And then I would make sure that yes meant something they would never forget. I didn't have to wait long. The following week, the house buzzed with planning again. Richard sat in the living room scrolling through his tablet, murmuring about seasonal rates. My daughter, Sienna, sprawled across the sofa, her nails glinting, tossing out names of destinations as though she were ordering cocktails. Maldives, Bora Bora, Santorini. My son, Evan, laughed at every suggestion, his voice bouncing around the room, careless and entitled. I stood in the kitchen doorway with a dish towel in my hands, listening. They weren't whispering, not even slightly cautious, because why should they be? In their minds, I was already a silent sponsor, a wallet on legs who would nod when the bill came. They didn't even consider whether I might want to come along. My presence wasn't part of the equation. Then I heard it. Evan said, "Don't worry about the cost. Mom's card is basically a family fund at this point." Oh, laughter followed, sharp and unkind. Something in me went still, like the surface of a lake, just before a storm hits. I didn't storm into the room, didn't raise my voice. Instead, I folded the towel carefully, too carefully, as if my whole sanity depended on the neatness of the edges. Their words pressed into me, not like knives this time, but like confirmation. This was who they had become, and who I had allowed them to become. Sienna stretched, yawning dramatically, and added, "She doesn't mind. She loves feeling helpful, keeps her busy while we're away." That sentence cracked something deep inside me. Keeps her busy. As if my whole existence was filler for their absences. As if my days and nights, my sacrifices, my career, my motherhood, all of it, was background noise to their sparkling adventures. I wanted to scream, but instead, I walked upstairs, quietly. In my room, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the framed photos on my dresser. Family portraits from years ago, the children still small, their arms flung around my neck, their smiles genuine. Richard's hand resting on my shoulder, not like a command, but like a promise. What had happened to those faces? To that love? Or maybe I was asking the wrong question. Maybe the love had always been shallow, and I was only now daring to see it clearly. I thought about all the trips, all the birthdays, all the moments I had been left behind. I thought about the cake I'd eaten alone, the photos they'd flaunted, the way my generosity was treated like a weakness. And then a thought rose, steady and undeniable. They need to feel what I feel, not to destroy them, not to harm them, but to mirror the emptiness they had carved into me, to show them what it meant to be left stranded, invisible, unconsidered. The idea frightened me at first. I am not a cruel woman. I have lived my life building people up, guiding them, teaching them to see beyond themselves. Revenge never sat comfortably in my hands. But this wasn't revenge. This was a lesson. A desperate, necessary lesson. I imagined them on a beach somewhere, demanding cocktails, laughing at their luck. And then I imagined them in a place that was not what they expected. No luxury, no endless comfort, no smiling staff to clean up after them. A place that would strip them down to themselves, force them to face each other without the glitter. I closed my eyes, and the picture sharpened. A deserted island. Remote. Empty. The kind of destination travel brochures sometimes call untouched paradise, though in reality it was just desolate. No Wi-Fi, no room service, no soft pillows, just sand, wind, and silence. For the first time in years, a smile curled across my lips. That night, while they continued their research downstairs, I opened my laptop. I searched flights, locations, islands marketed as exclusive retreats. I learned how easy it was to adjust bookings when you were the one paying. My heart raced, not with fear, but with a strange thrill, the kind you feel standing on the edge of a cliff, wind whipping your hair. This would be my moment, my turning point. I thought of their laughter, their careless words, their endless taking. And for the first time, in a long while, I didn't feel powerless. I felt awake. I whispered into the quiet of my room. Not this time. Not ever again. Have you ever been in a situation like this? If you were in this situation, would you forgive or take revenge? Comment below to let us know. I became a ghost in my own house. Not the invisible kind they had grown accustomed to, but a deliberate ghost. One that watches, listens, and moves with purpose. I kept my expression neutral, my tone soft. I didn't want them to suspect the storm I was preparing. The first step was research. Every night, when the house fell silent and their laughter no longer echoed down the hallways, I sat at my desk with the glow of my laptop, painting my face. I scrolled through endless websites of exclusive destinations, smiling at the marketing tricks I'd once fallen for myself. Untouched paradise. Disconnect to reconnect. Where luxury meets nature. I knew better. Behind every glossy description, there were places stripped of convenience, stripped of comfort, where even wealthy travelers sometimes complained about too much silence or no signal. That was what I wanted. Silence. No escape routes. No distractions. Just the raw taste of being stranded. I found it after several nights of searching. An island, remote and sparsely populated, marketed as a retreat for true adventurers. In reality, it was little more than a speck of land, with one crumbling guest house that reviewers described as abandoned and nightmarish. Some travelers had left within a day, desperate to return to civilization. Others complained about the lack of electricity, food options, and even clean water. Perfect. I sat back, reading the bitter reviews with a smile tugging at my lips. They would expect the Maldives, and instead, they would land in emptiness. The next step was subtler. I couldn't just announce my willingness to pay for the trip, it would seem suspicious. I had to play the part they expected of me. So one evening, when Sienna leaned across the kitchen counter, casually mentioning the resort she had in mind, I responded in the way she anticipated, with quiet compliance. Of course, darling, just send me the details and I'll take care of it. Her smile was immediate, triumphant. She didn't question it. None of them did. While they slept, I booked the flights. Then, instead of reserving their glittering resort, I rerouted the funds, purchasing tickets that connected them straight to the deserted island. I even arranged transfers so that, on paper, everything looked seamless because they would never bother to check the fine print. They never had before. I deleted confirmation emails, edited receipts, made everything appear polished. Years of handling family paperwork had made me skilled at slipping details past them. They trusted me to manage it all, trusted me to make it easy. They had no idea that trust was about to be their undoing. And yet, as I worked, a small voice whispered inside me, "Is this too much? Will they forgive me? Will I forgive myself?" I closed my eyes, gripping the edge of the desk. This wasn't cruelty. This wasn't about abandoning them. It was about forcing them to look in the mirror, to taste the loneliness I had swallowed, trip after trip, to feel the sting of being forgotten, uninvited, unimportant. I remembered the birthdays spent alone, the calls for money disguised as affection, the way Richard's hand on my shoulder had become more of a weight than a comfort. My heart hardened again. No, this wasn't too much. It was exactly right. I began preparing small things, just in case they called me from the island. I saved screenshots of the cruel phrases I had overheard. "She loves feeling useful. Mom's card is basically a family fund." If they dared accuse me of betrayal, I would show them their own words, twisted like knives. But I didn't just prepare evidence. I also prepared myself. For years, I had been the silent shadow, swallowing my own needs. Now, I rehearsed what I would say when the confrontation came. I practiced in the mirror. "You treated me like a card, not a person. You left me behind without hesitation. Now you'll understand what that feels like." Each sentence rolled off my tongue with more power. My reflection, once timid and hesitant, grew sharper, clearer. For the first time in years, I saw not a woman discarded, but a woman reclaiming control. The strangest part? They never noticed. My family was so absorbed in their excitement, so distracted by their own greed, that they didn't see the subtle shifts in me. Sienna chattered about beach outfits. Evan bragged to his friends about another 5-star trip on Mom. Richard occasionally raised an eyebrow at the bills, but not enough to care. They were blind, and I was content to let them stay blind. One night, while packing their bags, Sienna left her phone on the table. A message flashed across the screen from one of her friends. "You're so lucky your mom pays for everything. I wish mine did that." Sienna replied with a laughing emoji and wrote, "Yeah, she's like our personal ATM. Works out great." I froze, staring at the glowing screen. An ATM. That was all I was. Not even a person. Not even a mother. Just a machine that spat out money when asked. My hands shook not with sadness this time, but with certainty. Any trace of doubt evaporated. They had sealed their fate with their own words. I turned off her phone, placed it back on the table, and walked upstairs. My mind was clear, sharper than it had ever been. They thought they were going on a holiday. They thought they would laugh, drink, and celebrate while I sat at home, forgotten once again. But this time, I would not be the one left behind. This time, they would be the ones stranded. I had imagined the moment for so long that when it finally came, it felt almost ordinary. Just a few quiet clicks on my laptop, a couple of deliberate keystrokes, and the world I was building for them snapped into place. That was it, the moment of the perfect switch. Richard had left his credit card lying on the coffee table, as usual, but it wasn't needed. They never asked for receipts, never cross-checked confirmations. They trusted me blindly. After all, I had been their fixer for years, the one who ironed out the wrinkles, covered the gaps, made sure every flight connected, every hotel room awaited them. They assumed I'd do it again. And I did. Just not in the way they thought. Their luxury island resort existed only in their imagination. What I booked was a modest charter flight to a remote outpost, then a transfer ferry that only ran twice a week. Their villa was a dilapidated guest house, barely functional, with reviews warning of unsanitary conditions, wild dogs roaming the beach, and insect infestations. Most importantly, the island had little to no cell service. I was meticulous. I used my card to pay for everything so the names and dates lined up with their requests. I adjusted the details on the itinerary's subtle changes, hardly noticeable unless they bothered to zoom in. Island Retreat looked close enough to the original resort name. They would never catch it. I even downloaded the resort's brochure, just in case they asked to see it, and slipped it into the family group chat. Their excitement swelled immediately. Sienna texted, "Looks perfect. Mom, you're a lifesaver." Evan chimed in, "Knew you'd handle it. You always do." Richard didn't text. He rarely did. But later that night, he kissed my forehead absent-mindedly and said, "Thank you for making it easy." Making it easy. That was what I'd been reduced to. As I lay in bed afterward, I stared at the ceiling and let the reality of what I'd done settle into me. A strange calm washed over me, mixed with an electric current of anticipation. For years I had been passive, watching my own life pass like scenery outside a window. But now I was the one turning the wheel. Still, a part of me wondered, was this too cruel? They would arrive expecting beauty and be met with desolation. They would feel betrayed, furious. They might even hate me. But hadn't they done worse to me? Wasn't this only a reflection of what they had inflicted time and time again? I had been left behind, forgotten, while they basked in pleasures I paid for. I had eaten dinners alone while they toasted champagne. I had been reduced to an ATM, a tool, a background figure. This wasn't cruelty. This was symmetry. I prepared myself for their departure day. On the surface, I played the same role I always had. Fussing over luggage, reminding them about passports, slipping travel-sized sanitizers into side pockets. I even packed them sandwiches, because that was what they expected. None of them saw the slight tremor in my hands, or the way my eyes lingered on their faces, memorizing them before everything shifted. At the airport, Richard handed me his watch to keep safe, as though I were a storage locker, not a wife. Sienna hugged me quickly, her perfume sharp and cold. Evan ruffled my hair as though I were a pet. "Don't miss us too much, Mom," he teased. "Enjoy yourselves," I replied evenly, and I meant it in my own way. They were about to enjoy themselves differently than they had planned. I watched them walk through security, their bodies swallowed by the crowd of travelers, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the familiar ache of being left behind. Instead, I felt light, like I had released a weight I'd been carrying too long. When I got home, the house was silent. Normally, that silence gnawed at me, a reminder of absence. But now, it felt like the pause before a symphony begins. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat in the armchair, and waited. I knew what was coming. Confusion, anger, desperation. Eventually, the call would reach me, and when it did, I would be ready. I looked at the framed family photo on the mantel, Richard, Sienna, Evan, all smiling with arms wrapped around me. To any outsider, it was the picture of love. But I knew better. And soon, they would too. They thought this trip was another indulgence. But it wasn't. It was a mirror. And when they looked into it, they would finally see themselves. The morning of their departure dawned bright and sharp, the kind of day that would normally sting me with loneliness. The ritual had been carved into my bones over the years, standing in the doorway, waving as they drove off, smiling until the car turned the corner, then returning to an empty house, and the silence that swallowed me whole. But this time was different. This time, I didn't feel the sting. I felt anticipation. I brewed coffee and lingered at the kitchen window as the house filled with the usual chaotic flurry of departure. Sienna clattered around in heels, dragging her suitcase over the hardwood floors like she was punishing it. Evan stomped down the stairs with his headphones already on, announcing that he was so ready for cocktails by the water. Richard paced through the living room, patting his pockets, muttering about tickets and chargers. I had all of it under control, of course. The documents were neatly stacked in the folder I had prepared, their boarding passes tucked safely inside. None of them thought to double-check. They never did. "Mom, you printed the confirmations, right?" Sienna asked, as she painted gloss over her lips, barely glancing at me. "Yes, they're in your carry-on," I replied evenly. She nodded absently, satisfied. That was how it always was. I solved the problems before they appeared, and they called that helpfulness. They had no idea how far my help had gone this time. When the driver pulled up, I carried their smaller bags to the curb. Richard handed me his jacket, saying he didn't want to wrinkle it on the flight. Evan tossed me his empty coffee cup, as if I were a trash bin. Sienna gave me a quick air kiss, already scrolling her phone. "You're the best, Mom," Evan said, sliding into the car without looking at me. "I don't know what we'd do without you," Richard added. His tone was flat, distracted, already halfway to the island he believed awaited him. I forced a smile and waved as the car pulled away, their laughter and chatter muffled by the closing doors. For once, their words didn't slice me. They sounded hollow, like echoes bouncing back from a cave. I stood in the driveway until the taillights disappeared. My heart thudded, not with the ache of abandonment, but with something exhilarating, dangerous. Power. Inside, the house felt cavernous, but not empty. I walked slowly through the rooms, savoring the quiet. It was my silence this time, chosen, not inflicted. I set the kettle to boil, made myself another cup of coffee, and sat in the armchair by the window. As the minutes ticked into hours, I pictured them. I could see it so clearly, Richard striding confidently through the airport, Evan joking with Sienna, all of them expecting champagne and infinity pools. They'd land with smiles plastered across their faces, certain that paradise was waiting. And then, I imagined their steps slowing, their smiles faltering as they looked around. The barren guest house, the lack of staff, the heat pressing down without relief, their phones blinking, no service. A laugh escaped my throat before I could stop it. It wasn't cruel, it was almost giddy. The kind of laugh that bursts out when you realize a secret you've been carrying alone is finally starting to unfold. But as the day stretched on, guilt crept in like an unwelcome shadow. I thought of Sienna as a child, her tiny hands clutching mine on her first day of school. I thought of Evan, curled on my chest as an infant, his breathing soft and trusting. Even Richard, once upon a time, had looked at me with something like devotion. Had I gone too far? I stood, pacing the living room. The clock ticked steadily. They would be in the air by now. Too late to turn back. I tried to soothe myself with logic. This wasn't about cruelty. I wasn't leaving them in danger. Flights ran twice a week, ferries connected to the mainland. They wouldn't starve. They wouldn't die. But they would feel. For the first time in years, they would feel the hollow ache of being forgotten, of expecting comfort, and finding only silence. I poured myself a glass of wine, though the sun had barely set. The stem shook slightly in my hand as I raised it to my lips. This was the moment, the in-between space where the plan was set in motion, but its effects had yet to reach me. By the time night fell, I sat by the phone, half dreading and half craving the inevitable call. My heart leapt at every vibration, only to settle again when it was just a spam number or a notification. I wanted to see their names light up the screen, hear the disbelief in their voices, taste the reversal of power, but the calls didn't come that night. Instead, I went to bed, imagining them, stepping off the plane, confusion beginning to bloom like a bruise. I pictured Richard's frown, Sienna's shrill complaint, Evan's careless bravado fading. I saw them struggling with their bags, looking for service, realizing there was none. I pulled the covers up to my chin and let sleep come, heavy and dreamless. Tomorrow, I thought, everything will change. The first message came the following afternoon. My phone buzzed, and when I saw Sienna's name flash across the screen, my pulse kicked up. For a moment, I just stared, letting the vibration thrum through me like a secret drumbeat. Then I answered. Mom? Her voice was sharp, clipped the sound of someone already unraveling. What is this? Where the hell did you send us? I leaned back in my chair, forcing my tone into a calm I didn't entirely feel. What do you mean, darling? You landed safely, didn't you? Safely, she laughed, high and bitter. There's nothing here. The place looks abandoned like something out of a horror movie. The guest house, if you can even call it, that has cracked windows, no reception desk, and bugs everywhere. There's no Wi-Fi, no AC. Evan nearly fainted carrying his suitcase in this heat. I pictured it all as she ranted. Their shiny luggage wheels cutting into uneven sand. The way their expensive shoes would sink into dust. Sienna's manicured nails twitching as she brushed at invisible insects. The image bloomed in my mind so vividly I almost smiled. That's strange, I said softly, letting each word linger. The brochure looked beautiful. Private beaches, off-grid relaxation, the chance to reconnect with nature. Isn't that what you all wanted? Evan's voice thundered in the background. This isn't funny, Mom. You screwed up. Fix it. But I didn't fix it. I just listened as their outrage built, overlapping voices spitting complaints. Richard finally took the phone, his tone heavy with controlled anger. Marjorie, he said, the way a lawyer might address an unruly witness. This isn't acceptable. The kids are miserable. The accommodations are. He stopped, exhaled through his nose. It's unlivable. Get us out of here. Now. I closed my eyes, savoring the moment. For years, I had been the one begging for scraps of affection, the one left behind. Now, for the first time, they needed me. They were stranded. Not by chance, but by my design. I'm sure you'll manage, I murmured. It's only a week. Think of it as an adventure. Richard's silence on the other end was heavy, then sharp. This isn't you. What's gotten into you? But before I could answer, the line crackled and dropped. Signal gone. I sat in my living room, the phone silent in my hand, my heart racing, with something that was equal parts triumph and guilt. I set it on the table, listening to the tick of the clock on the wall. The balance of power had shifted. Meanwhile, on the island, I could imagine how quickly the cracks spread. Evan, always the loudest, tried to keep up his bravado at first. It's fine. We'll figure it out. There's gotta be something nearby. But as the sun pressed down and the reality settled in, his jokes thinned. Sienna, spoiled and sharp-tongued, was less forgiving. She stormed around the peeling walls of the guest house, swatting at mosquitoes, her voice rising into shrieks every few minutes. I can't stay here. I won't stay here. And Richard was the worst kind of angry. Silent, simmering, his jaw clenched so tight it must have hurt. He didn't yell, but he didn't soothe either. He let the weight of his disappointment hang in the air like a storm cloud. And for once, I didn't feel crushed under it. They had no car. The ferry that brought them wouldn't return for days. The handful of locals barely spoke English, and from the reviews I'd read, they had little interest in catering to travelers. Supplies were scarce, food options meager, even bottled water was a luxury. Their unity, once so smug and unshakable, began to splinter. Evan accused Richard of not double-checking the booking. Sienna accused Evan of downplaying the warnings. Richard snapped at them both, reminding them it was my responsibility. And in that, he was right, but not in the way he thought. By the time the sun went down, they were sitting on the rickety porch of the guest house, sweat clinging to their clothes, mosquitoes biting at their arms. They looked out at the endless dark ocean, the silence pressing in around them, and for the first time, they knew what I had known for years: abandonment. Back home, I opened a bottle of wine and sat by the window, letting the evening breeze drift in. The phone hadn't rung again. Whether it was the poor signal or their stunned silence, I didn't care. For the first time, the house didn't feel empty. It felt full of possibility, of power, of something new. I whispered to myself, almost laughing. So this is what it feels like. Their first shock had landed. The lesson had only just begun. The second day on the island was when the anger turned into fear. Their first night had been restless. The beds in the guest house were stiff, the air heavy with humidity, the whine of insects constant in the dark. Sienna claimed she saw a rat scuttle across the floorboards and screamed so loudly she woke the others. Evan cursed, fumbling for his phone, only to be greeted by a black screen dead battery, no service even if it were charged. Richard tried to play the role of leader, pacing with his hands on his hips, but even he looked shaken when the generator sputtered and went out, plunging the guest house into pitch black. I wasn't there, but I didn't need to be. I knew my family. I could picture the way Sienna curled herself into a ball, whispering that she couldn't breathe in the stifling heat. I could imagine Evan pacing, restless and irritated, pretending he wasn't scared, but jumping at every noise outside. And Richard, he would have lain flat on his back, eyes open, jaw clenched, already plotting whom to blame when they got back. By morning, their nerves were frayed. The call came just after noon. This time it was Evan. "Mom," he barked, skipping any greeting. "We can't stay here. There's nothing. The locals barely understand us. There's no food except some disgusting soup. Sienna couldn't even swallow, and the ferry doesn't run again until Friday." "Friday, Mom. That's 4 days away." Veh. I sipped my tea, letting his panic wash over me. "It sounds inconvenient," I said calmly, "but you'll manage. Think of it as a bonding experience." "A bonding? Are you kidding me?" His voice cracked. "This isn't a vacation. This is a nightmare. There's no Wi-Fi, no beach chairs, no bars, nothing. Just sand, bugs, and heat. Everyone's going insane." In the background, I heard Sienna sobbing, her voice high and thin. "Tell her I'm not staying another night here. I can't do it." V. Then Richard's voice, low and commanding, cut through. "Give me the phone." When he spoke, it wasn't anger I heard. It was desperation. "Marjorie, enough is enough. Whatever mistake was made, fix it. Call the airline. Get us out, today." For a moment, I let silence hang between us. I wanted him to feel it, the silence I had endured for years when I waited for a phone call that never came. When they were off sipping cocktails while I sat alone with a reheated dinner. Finally, I said, "I didn't make a mistake." The line went quiet. "What?" Richard's voice was cautious now, wary. "I didn't make a mistake," I repeated, my tone sharp enough to cut. "You wanted an island retreat. You got one. Off-grid, private, untouched. Exactly what you asked for." I could almost feel the weight of his silence through the phone, the realization beginning to bloom. Before he could respond, the line fizzled and died again, leaving only static. I set the phone down on the table, my hands trembling. Not from fear, but from the rush of release. For once, I had left them stranded. On the island, things unraveled quickly. By the second night, they were quarreling openly. Evan accused Sienna of overpacking useless things, dresses and heels, but no practical clothes. Sienna shot back that Evan had been too busy bragging to his friends to actually research where they were going. Richard barked at them both to shut up, but his authority held less weight under the pressing heat and the gnaw of hunger. The small convenience shop in the village offered little stale bread, canned fish, bottled water at a price that made them blanch. Evan bought some, but it wasn't enough to soothe them. Their bodies weren't used to deprivation. Their tempers frayed with every growl of the stomach. The worst part wasn't the lack of comfort. It was the lack of distraction. With no Wi-Fi, no bars, no screens to scroll, they were left with each other. And stripped of their comforts, they began to see each other's flaws. "Dad, this is on you," Evan snapped one night. "You should have checked. You always say Mom messes things up, but you didn't even look." "Don't you put this on me," Richard snarled. "Your mother handled the arrangements. She always does. She wouldn't do this by accident." Sienna's voice cracked with panic. She planned this. I know she did. Richard turned sharply toward her, his eyes narrowing. But deep down, I knew she was right. And perhaps a part of Richard knew it too. Back at home, I felt the shift like a current. The calls grew shorter, sharper. Their voices cracked with strain. Each time, they expected me to fold, to rescue them. Each time, I refused. It's just a few days, I said gently, as though soothing a child. Make the best of it. Inside, my heart was a storm. Part of me ached at their distress, memories of softer days whispering that I should relent. But the stronger part, the part forged from years of being ignored and used, held firm. They needed this. They needed to taste what it was to be discarded, uncomfortable, helpless. The panic was rising, and I let it. I poured myself another glass of wine, leaned back in my chair, and whispered to the empty room, "Now you know how it feels." The call came on the third night, long past midnight. The house was dark and silent, but the shrill vibration of my phone on the nightstand jolted me awake. For a moment, I just stared at the glowing screen. Richard. I let it ring once more, savoring the sound, before I pressed, accept. Marjorie. His voice was gravel, tired, and furious all at once. We need to talk, now. Behind him, I could hear the chaos, Sienna's sobs, Evan's raised voice, the hollow echo of arguments bouncing off bare walls. We're done playing games, Richard continued. The conditions here are unacceptable. The ferry's delayed, supplies are scarce. The kids are miserable. You knew what you were booking. Why would you do this to us? I sat up in bed, switching on the lamp. The light illuminated the quiet order of my room, the neat stack of books, the water glass on the nightstand. My sanctuary, untouched by their chaos. I did it, I said evenly. Because now you know how it feels. Silence. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Evan's voice broke in, shouting from somewhere behind his father. Mom, are you insane? We're stuck here because of you. You've lost it. Shut up, Evan, Sienna shrieked, her panic bubbling into rage. Mom, why? Why would you send us here? What did we ever do to deserve this? Her question cut deeper than I expected, but I forced myself to stay steady. I rose from the bed and walked slowly to the window, looking out into the still night. You really don't know? My voice was low, controlled, but sharp enough to slice through their noise. All these years, you've used me. Not just my money, me. You left me behind while you chased luxury with my card. Do you have any idea what it feels like to be abandoned over and over by your own family? To sit alone on birthdays while you toast in another country? To eat dinner in silence while you send me pictures of infinity pools and champagne? For a moment, the only sound was the crackle of the poor connection. Then, Richard spoke. Quieter this time, though no less tense. You could have said something. I laughed bitterly. Said something. Richard. I did. You just didn't listen. None of you ever listened. It was easier for you to pretend I was happy being your sponsor, your fixer, your ATM. Easier to believe that I loved staying home. Invisible, while you lived the life I paid for. Sienna's voice was trembling now, threaded with fear. Mom. We didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did, I snapped. I heard you. I heard every word. Mom will just pay. She loves feeling useful. Do you know how small those words made me feel? Do you know how many nights I sat here, wondering if you'd even notice if I disappeared? Their silence stretched, heavy, suffocating. I wanted them to feel it. The emptiness, the ache, the way loneliness chewed at me until it hardened into something darker. This island, I continued, is your mirror. The silence, the discomfort, the feeling of being stranded, this is what you gave me every time you left me behind. V. Evan cursed under his breath. Richard exhaled sharply, the sound of a man cornered. Sienna whimpered, but for once, she had no words to spit back. Mom, Richard finally said, his tone shifting, trying to regain control. You've made your point. Enough is enough. We'll talk about this when we get home. Just fix it. I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. Number, you'll stay. You'll live this week the way I've lived years. Uncomfortable, forgotten, powerless. Then maybe you'll understand. Their voices erupted again, pleading, angry, desperate. I let them crash against me like waves, but I didn't bend. Before hanging up, I spoke one last time, steady and final. How do you think they will react when I reveal that to everyone? And then I ended the call. I set the phone on the table, my chest rising and falling, my body trembling with the enormity of what I had just done. I wasn't the invisible one anymore. The power had shifted. For the first time in years, I felt seen, even if it was through their outrage. After I ended the call, the house was silent again, but it was not the same silence I'd known for years. This one vibrated, alive with the echo of my own words. My chest felt lighter, though my hands still trembled. I had finally told them what I'd been burying for so long that they had turned me into an object, a machine, a ghost in my own family. And now, finally, they had heard me. The next morning, I found a string of missed calls on my phone. Dozens of them, Richard, Sienna, Evan, each trying again and again. I didn't answer. I made myself coffee, sat in the kitchen by the window, and let the steam fog my glasses. I could almost imagine them, pacing the crumbling porch of that guest house, watching their phone bars flicker desperately, wondering when I'd finally pick up. When I did answer, it was Sienna's call. Her voice was hoarse from crying. Mom, please, I can't stay here. I can't sleep. I can't eat. My skin's covered in bites. My stomach hurts from that awful soup. Please, just bring us home. I'll never ask you for anything again. Her tone was desperate, almost childlike. For a moment, I wavered. A flash of the little girl she once was surfacing in my memory. The girl who used to slip her tiny hand into mine at the grocery store. The one who whispered secrets into my ear at night. But then, just as quickly, I remembered her voice only weeks ago, laughing with Evan. Mom's card is basically a family fund. That laughter had been sharp, cruel, without a shred of gratitude. You'll survive, Sienna, I said quietly. For years I've survived too alone. You left me behind every single time. Do you know what it feels like to sit alone on your birthday while your family is clinking glasses on another continent? Do you know how small it makes a person feel to know she isn't wanted, only her money is? Mom, it's not the same, she cried. It is exactly the same, I snapped, my voice sharper than I expected. Every time you left me here, every time you drained me dry, every time you pretended my generosity was duty, you stranded me. Alone, invisible, forgotten. Now it's your turn. One. She sobbed into the line, but I didn't soften. Not this time. Later, Richard called. His voice was different, less commanding, more measured. Marjorie, he began. I know you're angry. You've made your point, but punishing us like this isn't the answer. You could have just told us. I laughed bitterly. I did tell you, Richard. Not once. Not twice. I said I wanted to come along. I said I wanted to be included. And do you know what you told me? Don't make things complicated. As if my needs were nothing more than an obstacle to your convenience. Don't you dare tell me I didn't speak. He exhaled hard, the sound of a man trying to hold his ground. You've turned into someone I don't even recognize. No, I said firmly. I finally turned into myself. The woman you ignored. The wife you reduced to an accountant. The mother you all treated like a bank. That woman is speaking now. And you don't like it because for once, you can't silence her with guilt. There was a pause. For the first time, Richard didn't have a quick retort. Evan's call came next. Predictably, it was angrier than the others. This is insane, Mom. You've lost it. Who does this to their own family? People are gonna think you've gone crazy when they find out. Crazy? I repeated. Is it crazy to finally demand respect? Is it crazy to expect to be treated as a person instead of a wallet? Maybe it is, Evan. Maybe I've gone crazy, but at least it's the kind of crazy that remembers I exist. He swore under his breath. This isn't teaching us a lesson, it's just cruel. No, I said. What's cruel is the way you laughed at me behind my back. What's cruel is calling your mother an ATM. What's cruel is leaving me behind over and over, as if my company was worthless but my money was priceless. You've mistaken my silence for acceptance. That was your mistake. Now, you live with the consequences. For once, Evan didn't have a comeback. The line went dead a few seconds later. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Guilt still nipped at me. Yes, but under it was something stronger. Release. For the first time in decades, my voice had power. I wasn't a background figure anymore. I imagined them in that guest house, the walls closing in, their tempers clashing like thunder, forced to face each other, forced to taste deprivation. And all the while, the knowledge pressing down on them, that I had done this, that I had chosen not to rescue them. Maybe it was cruel, maybe it was harsh, but it was also the truth. And sometimes, the bitter truth is the only medicine left. By the fifth day, the cracks in their unity had split wide open. I could hear it in their voices when the phone finally connected again, thin, jagged, frayed. The island was not just wearing them down physically, it was breaking them apart piece by piece. When Richard spoke, he sounded older, his words dragged down by fatigue. Marjorie, it's falling apart here. They're at each other's throats. In the background, I caught the sharp rise of Evan's voice. This is your fault, Dad. You're supposed to be the one in charge. You let Mom do everything, and now look where we are. Don't you dare talk to me like that. Richard roared back, his voice cracking under the strain. Then Sienna's shrill cry, "Stop it, just stop it, I can't take this anymore." Her sobs bled into the line, thin and desperate. I closed my eyes, letting the storm wash through the phone into my quiet living room. For years, their unity had been their weapon against me, laughing together, dismissing me together, united in their entitlement. Now, finally, that unity was gone. Do you hear that, Richard? I asked softly. That's what happens when you strip away the comforts, the distractions, the endless spending. All that's left is the truth. And the truth is, you don't know how to be a family without me holding everything together. He didn't answer. Perhaps he knew I was right. Later that evening, it was Sienna who called me again. Her voice was quieter this time, worn thin by exhaustion. Mom, I don't understand why you hate us so much. The words pierced me, though not in the way she intended. Hate? I shook my head slowly, staring at the photo of her on my mantel, a gap-toothed smile, hair in pigtails, eyes sparkling with trust. I don't hate you, Sienna, I said gently. If I hated you, I would have let this go on forever. I would have stayed silent, kept paying, kept pretending. But I love you too much to let you believe that treating me like an object is love. This is the only way you'll see what you've done. She sniffled. It doesn't feel like love. It feels like punishment. Sometimes love and punishment look the same, I whispered. But the difference is this: punishment destroys, love teaches, and I need you to learn. Her silence stretched, trembling at the edges. Then, softly, I'm scared, Mom. How is Stan? For a moment, my heart wavered, but I steadied myself. Good. Fear means you're finally awake. Meanwhile, Evan's anger only grew sharper. When he finally got through to me, his words spat like fire. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Sitting at home, smiling, while we suffer out here. You're sick, Mom. You're twisted. I let him finish, let him spill all his venom, before I answered. Enjoying it? Number relieved, yes, because finally, you're forced to see me. Not the ATM. Not the fixer. Me. And If you think that's twisted, maybe you should ask yourself what kind of son calls his mother a machine. There was a pause, then the call cut off. Richard, though, was different. His calls grew quieter, more subdued. Not apologetic, not yet, but less full of bluster. One night, his voice came low, nearly broken. You've made your point, Marjorie. Maybe we took advantage. Maybe we didn't see what it was doing to you. But this, his words faltered. You've turned us against each other. The kids won't even speak civilly anymore. Sienna blames Evan. Evan blames me. And He stopped. We're falling apart. I listened, my heart a strange mixture of sorrow and grim satisfaction. Then maybe you'll understand what it felt like for me, watching my family laugh and bond while I sat alone, left out. Do you know how lonely it is to see your children love each other more than they ever loved you? He didn't answer, but the silence itself was answer enough. On the island, their resentment boiled. Evan accused Richard of cowardice, of hiding behind me all these years. Sienna accused Evan of recklessness, of never thinking beyond the moment. And finally, in a bitter twist, they turned on each other over who had drained more from me, Evan's impulsive adventures, or Sienna's endless luxuries. And Richard? He sat apart, staring at the ocean, the weight of his failure pressing down on him. He had built a family that functioned on my sacrifices, and now that scaffolding was gone. Without me, they collapsed into chaos. Back home, I sat on my porch in the evening light, listening to the cicadas hum. For years, I had been the silent glue. Now, I was the knife that cut them loose. And as much as it pained me, I knew this tearing apart was necessary. Sometimes you have to break something to rebuild it. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel invisible. I felt powerful. They wanted me to fix it, but I wouldn't, not yet. They needed to sit in their brokenness. They needed to taste the fallout of the life they'd chosen. Only then would they understand. Liberation doesn't come like lightning. It doesn't strike once and leave you changed forever. Liberation is a slow unfolding, like a curtain being drawn back, inch by inch, until the sunlight finally fills the room. I felt it first in the mornings. For years, when my family traveled, I woke to silence that felt like abandonment. I'd sit at the kitchen table, reheating old coffee, imagining them laughing somewhere under a foreign sun. That silence had been my tormentor. But now, the same silence felt mine. It wasn't emptiness anymore. It was space. Space to breathe, to think, to finally hear myself. I began to move differently in my own home. My steps felt lighter, my back straighter. I caught myself humming as I made breakfast, something I hadn't done in decades. It was as if by exiling my family even for a week, I had invited myself back in. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting on them. I wasn't glued to the phone, praying for a photo, a message, a scrap of attention. Instead, they were the ones waiting on me. They were the ones stranded, desperate for my words, my decisions. The balance of power had shifted so completely, I almost laughed at how blind I had been to my own strength all this time. Their calls came less frequently now. Not because their desperation had faded, but because the weak island signal betrayed them. When they did manage to reach me, their voices were cracked, humbled, even pleading. "Mom," Sienna whispered one afternoon, her voice trembling through static. "I swear, I'll never take advantage of you again. Please, just get us out of here." And though a part of me softened at the sound of her brokenness, another part of me felt the solid ground beneath my feet. Finally, I thought. Finally, she sees me not as her provider, but as her mother. Evan, too, was different. His anger had dulled, sharpened into something like regret. One night, he said quietly, "I didn't realize how much we hurt you. I thought you liked helping." I didn't think about what it cost. The words came haltingly, like a child admitting a lie. They weren't enough. Not yet. But they were something. A crack in the wall. Even Richard grew quieter. He stopped blaming, stopped demanding, and began asking. "What do you want from us, Marjorie?" He asked one night, his voice low and tired. "Tell me what will fix this." I almost smiled at the irony. For so many years I had asked what would fix us, and he had never answered. Now, he was the one reaching, and I was the one deciding whether to open my hand. In their absence, I rediscovered myself. I went walking each morning, breathing in the crisp air, noticing the way the sun lit the edges of the trees. I stopped at the cafe downtown, ordered tea, and sat with a book for hours. No one asked me where I was going. No one needed me to solve their problems. The freedom was intoxicating. At the counseling center, I looked into the eyes of young women who spoke about being used, being invisible, and I no longer felt like a hypocrite. I could finally tell them, with conviction, "You have the right to demand respect. You are not an accessory to anyone's life. You are the main character in your own story." And I knew at last that I believed those words for myself. One evening, I found myself standing in front of the mirror, studying my reflection. The woman who stared back at me wasn't meek, wasn't tired. Her eyes were clearer, her mouth set in determination. For so long, I had been reduced to a role: wife, mother, sponsor. Now, I saw myself again, Marjorie Hale. A woman with desires, limits, and, finally, a voice. By the time the week neared its end, my family had been stripped down to something raw. Their voices on the phone were no longer arrogant, no longer entitled. They were subdued, cautious. "Mom," Sienna said one night, "I used to think you were just fine. That you didn't care about trips or traveling with us. I didn't know you felt left out. I didn't know you wanted more." I let the silence linger before I answered. "You didn't want to know. That's the difference." And, she cried softly, but I didn't rush to soothe her. Not this time. Some lessons only sink in when they're allowed to hurt. As for me, I felt lighter with each passing day. It wasn't just about punishing them. It was about reclaiming myself. I had spent decades bending, giving, erasing my own wants in the name of love. Now, for the first time, I knew what it meant to stand straight, to say no, to demand space. Liberation is not loud. It doesn't shout. It's the quiet certainty that you deserve to exist fully, without apology. And sitting in my living room that final night, with the phone quiet beside me, I knew I was free. Free from the chains of their entitlement. Free from the lie that silence was love. Free to choose myself. And I vowed then that when they came back tired, broken, desperate, I would not slip back into old patterns. They would return to a different woman, the woman I was always meant to be. The day of their return arrived with an eerie calm. The house was spotless, the air still, the sun draping soft gold across the living room floor. I had imagined this moment all week. The sound of the key in the lock, the sight of their weary faces. And yet, as I waited, I felt no anticipation, no nervous flutter, only steadiness. When the door finally creaked open, I rose from my chair. They looked nothing like the family that had left a week ago. Sienna's hair, usually glossy and perfect, clung to her face in limp strands. Her clothes were wrinkled, her skin blotched with mosquito bites. Evan, always brimming with energy, slumped under the weight of his own silence. His tan was uneven, his eyes rimmed with fatigue. And Richard, proud, commanding Richard, looked diminished. His shoulders sagged, his jaw slack with something that might have been shame, though he tried to mask it with stiffness. No one spoke at first. The silence swelled between us, thick with all that had happened. Finally, Sienna broke. She dropped her bag and rushed toward me, tears spilling freely. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I didn't see. Please forgive me. Her arms wrapped around me, trembling, desperate. For a moment, my body stiffened, unsure. But then I let her cling to me, not because I wanted to erase her pain, but because I wanted her to feel the weight of my presence, the mother she had ignored, the woman she had taken for granted. Evan stood a few steps back, his mouth opening and closing, searching for words. I messed up, he finally said, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. I thought it was all just normal. You paying, you staying. I never thought about what it meant. I'm sorry too. His apology was awkward, halting, but real. Richard, however, stayed silent. He placed his bag down carefully, his eyes meeting mine with a mixture of defiance and exhaustion. When he finally spoke, his voice was brittle. You proved your point. I held his gaze. Did I? Or are you just waiting for things to go back to the way they were? His lips pressed into a thin line. He didn't answer. That evening, after the dust of their return had settled, I called them into the living room. For once, they sat quietly. No phones, no distractions. Just the three of them on the couch, their eyes fixed on me. I stood in front of them, feeling the gravity of the moment. You wanted to know why I did this, I began. The truth is simple. I needed you to understand. For years, you used me. You drained me. You left me behind. And you laughed while you did it. Their faces flickered with shame, regret, discomfort. I wasn't angry about the money, I continued. I was angry about the way you erased me. The way you treated me as though my place was behind you, carrying the weight while you enjoyed the view. That island, what you felt there? The loneliness, the discomfort, the helplessness, that was my life. Every single time you walked out that door without me. Sienna began to cry again. Evan lowered his head. Richard exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. I didn't do this to hurt you, I said softly. I did it to hold up a mirror, so you could see yourselves the way I've seen you. And maybe, just maybe you'd change. For a long moment, none of them spoke. The silence pressed in, heavy, but not suffocating. It felt necessary. Finally, Richard looked up. His eyes were tired, but there was something else in them too, a glimmer of recognition, perhaps even respect. So, what now? I drew a breath. Now, things are different. I won't be your wallet. I won't be your ghost. If you want me in your life, you will treat me as a person, as your mother, as your wife. If not, then you'll learn to live without me. The words hung in the air, final and irrevocable. In the days that followed, they moved carefully around me. Sienna offered to cook dinner, fumbling in the kitchen but trying. Evan brought groceries, a gesture so small, yet so uncharacteristic that it startled me. Even Richard was quieter, less demanding, not transformed, not yet, but altered, humbled. And me? I walked lighter. I spoke louder. I no longer shrank into the corners of my own home. For the first time, in decades, I felt whole. Liberation doesn't mean you stop loving. It means you stop letting love cost you your soul. As I sit here now, pen in hand, I wonder what comes next. I don't know if they will truly change. People rarely transform overnight. But I do know this. I have changed. And once you taste freedom, you cannot go back to chains. So I will wait, not with desperation, but with strength. If they rise to meet me as equals, as family, then perhaps we can rebuild. If not, then I will continue on this new path, one where my worth is not measured in credit card balances, but in the undeniable truth of who I am. My name is Marjorie Hale. I was invisible. I was used. But I am invisible no longer. Sometimes, we wait our whole lives for others to see us. We give, we bend, we sacrifice, hoping that one day, they will look up and notice. But sometimes, the only way to be seen is to stop giving until you vanish. Sometimes, the only way to teach love is through the sting of its absence. My family tasted what they gave me: a silence that burned, a loneliness that consumed. Whether they learn from it is up to them. But me? I've already learned my lesson. I don't need their validation to know my worth. And maybe that's the true liberation. Not revenge, not punishment, but the quiet realization that you are enough, even when no one else believes it. So, if you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever been used until you were hollow, remember this: your silence can be broken. Your story can be rewritten. You do not have to wait for someone else to free you. You can free yourself. If you were in this situation, what would you have done? Would you forgive? Or would you take revenge? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like mine.